We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, starting in verse 7 this morning. Let me tell you about what's happening in 10 days from now. In 10 days, we are going to be having our Ash Wednesday service. So I encourage you to put that on your calendar. If you've never been to an Ash Wednesday service, I highly encourage you to try one out. This is a service that's deeply meaningful to me as we're beginning the Lenten season. And so we'll start our Lenten series in 2 weeks, but this morning we are finishing a short little series from the book of 2 Corinthians today, which is entitled, It's Not Easy. And the title for the series comes from a story that you've heard me tell already if you've been here over the last few weeks. If you're new, lucky for you, I'm going to tell you the story again. When I was in school, I had a professor named Charles Seibert. His nickname was Chainsaw Charlie, which I didn't call him to his face, but I called him that many other times when he didn't hear me. And Chainsaw Charlie got that nickname because he had a propensity for telling you the truth, even if it tore down maybe some preconceived ideas that you had or tore down what made you feel comfortable. He was just that kind of person. He knew so much. Brilliant man. One day there was a young minister who was really just discouraged because things were really hard at the church that he was serving. Work was just wearing him down. He was exhausted. And so he goes to Dr. Seibert and tells him his plight, and Dr. Seibert responds and says, "Did you think it was going to be easy? You follow a guy who ends up on a cross." The life that God has called each and every one of us to is that life in which you follow someone who ended up on a cross. And so, of course, it's not going to be easy. And those words from Dr. Seibert would be extremely fitting in this day and age. Things are tough. Many of us notice that church feels different post-COVID. There's some who've theorized that COVID changed the landscape of church. I'm not one of those. I don't think COVID really changed church as much as it exacerbated what was already happening. It amplified what was already going on in church. But it's not just a Christian church that's different. In the American landscape, religion doesn't have the same place that it used to. For the first time, less than 50% of Americans would say that they're committed to a community of faith, whether that be a church, a temple, a synagogue, or a mosque. Less than 50% would say, this is what I'm a part of. So church, religion, it feels different. And it's not just big R religion, it's not just the church, but it's even in our tradition, the churches of Christ. The tradition that this church and many of us grew up in. It's been around for a while. 1906 was the first time it was officially designated as a denomination by sociologists. Those same sociologists would tell you that in 1985 was the peak of the churches of Christ in terms of attendance. And ever since 1990, attendance has slowly declined. Just a steady decline since 1990. We feel that. Texas has the most Church of Christ churches, and so maybe we don't feel it as acutely as other places, but we can tell church feels different. I mean, Westover feels different. I mean, if you look at how many people here on Sunday morning, it's different than what it used to be. The weird thing is that in the 6.5 years that I've been here, no time before right now has our finances been as healthy and strong as they currently are. So our finances are at the best position they've been since I've been here. But attendance is different. So there's a few ways to interpret that. One, which some of you are going to already say, well, Luke, people are just paying to not have to listen to you talk. I guess there's a lot of accountants this morning laughing. Or two is that what we have is a bunch of people who still feel committed to this church and the mission of this church, but the way our attendance patterns present is different. And so if you have a church of, say, 1,000 people, and on average people come to church 1.5 times a month, throw in a few visitors, and then all of a sudden you average maybe 500 people on a Sunday, and you go, that's just math. And it feels different, right? I can tell you finances are good, but when you look around and go, there aren't the same number of people here, or like many churches, it feels hard. Because what we want as Americans is things to always be up and to the right. We want trends to be going positively. We don't want to hear, oh, churches of Christ have been in steady decline since 1990. And I think the words of Dr. Seibert would be fitting right now. You follow a guy who ended up on a cross. Did you think it was going to be easy? And the American ideal of things always being up and to the right isn't consistent with the way of Jesus. It's not always up and to the right. So during this series, we've been listening to the words of Paul from the book of 2 Corinthians. And so this morning, let me read to you from 2 Corinthians 4. And if you are physically able, would you please stand for the reading of God's word out of respect? Starting in verse 7, Scripture says this: "But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For while we live, we are always being given up to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you." The word of the Lord. Please be seated. So Paul's in this peculiar situation where he's started this church maybe 6 years before this letter is written, and people in the church now are criticizing him. And one of the main criticisms he gets is that his life, his ministry, his work is just really hard. It's difficult. And for some, they think that disqualifies him. In the same way that some of us hear, oh, the churches of Christ are declining, maybe that disqualifies the legitimacy of this tradition. So people are saying that to Paul. And Paul's response is not to pretend like it doesn't exist, but he boasts about his weaknesses. He boasts about the adversity. And so he says that we are afflicted in every way, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We're persecuted, but we're not abandoned. We're struck down, but we're not destroyed. This is what's going on. We experience it. But then he says, it's by design. It's by design. It's like this. Because this treasure, this extraordinary treasure that we have, has been given to us in jars of clay. This is the design. All right, let me talk about something for a second that I know there's a lot of different opinions on. Paper straws. Paper straws, right? If I didn't value unity so much in the church, I would ask you to raise your hands if you like them or you don't, but I'm not going to do that. But the weird thing is you have different people with different perspectives on paper straws. Some love it, some hate it, but it's for the exact same reason. Right? If you just put aside the political pontification, which is on both sides of every issue, you put that aside, and the main reason people either like this or they don't like it is the same reason. Some people love them because these straws, they don't last. They don't last in your cup, and they don't last in landfills. And so they're reducing single-use plastic with something that doesn't last. Now, the other group is the people who don't like these straws, and the reason they don't like these straws is, guess what? Because they don't last. In your cup or anywhere, right? Now, I used to be a waiter some 20 years ago. It was the job that my wife still thinks is the coolest job I've ever had, which I don't know what it says about y'all, but nevertheless, when I was a waiter, I wish we had paper straws for one reason. Because it would tell customers, hey, it's time to go, right? Like if your straw's gone, you should be gone. You can't stay without a straw, right? But they don't last, and it's by design. Now, as many of you probably imagine, I'm a big fan of shooting skeet, clay pigeons. It's one of the things I love to do. So much so that I did it once, like 25 years ago, and haven't done it since then. But I really loved it. And one of the things about shooting skeet that I remember so clearly after I Google searched it is that once you shoot these clay pigeons, you don't have to go pick them up for the most part. Why? Because they're made of clay. They're made of dirt. They just go back to where they started. They disintegrate. That's the design. That was the plan all along. Paul says we have this treasure in something that doesn't last. It's just like a paper straw. It's just like shooting skeet. It's just like something you know. It's a jar of clay. And the reason you don't know what a jar of clay is because we all know you don't want a jar of clay because they won't last. That's not a good product to build something with. But Paul says this is the design. And so, yes, we have afflictions, and yes, we are perplexed, and yes, we're persecuted, and yes, we have adversity. But this is by design because you were made to be a jar of clay. But Paul goes on to say this a few verses later in chapter 5, starting verse 1. For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling. It's the same metaphor. Like you live in a tent. My family's not a big camping family. And I know there are some families that like to say, hey, my family, we love camping. That's our thing. Like historically speaking, every family was big into camping until like 10,000 years ago when we learned how to farm. And then we were able to build civilizations like houses. But the thing about a tent and camping is that you live in something that's temporary. It's like a paper straw. It's like a clay jar. It's not supposed to last forever. Paul says this is the design. Of course it's difficult. Of course it's not easy. Because this is what you are. You're temporary. You're like a tent. You're like a jar of clay. You're like a paper straw. But sometimes it's difficult to be temporary. And instead, you want to be eternal. Sometimes we want to take what is supposed to be short term and make it long term. Sometimes we take what's supposed to be for a moment and we want it to be for an eternity. And it's kind of painful to watch. It's not easy to see. All right, let me show you a clip. This is from a TV show that was out a while ago, 30 Rock. And in this scene, you have someone who used to be in law enforcement describing a brief special forces that he was on in which he pretended to be a high schooler. Take a look at this.
Well, I know that you were once a police officer.
I was part of a special task force of very young-looking cops who infiltrated high schools. How do you do, fellow kids?
You guys have seen the meme? Right here, let's go to the meme. Yes. When I turned 40, I saw this meme a lot. A lot of people sent this to me, and I still haven't forgiven them. The humor in this, even if you didn't watch the show, is that this actor, he's in his mid-50s when this is filmed. I don't know how many teenagers look like that. Sometimes you want to be what you aren't. And it's funny when it's a comedic performance by an actor, but it's not so funny when we see it in real life. I had a friend who worked at a church, and the pastor at this church had been around for decades. And he was at that point where he was struggling with his sense of relevancy to everyone. And so he had some of the younger people on staff give him some tips on how he should dress to be relevant. Yeah, I heard it. Oof, that's the right response. And one of my friends who's working at the church had an older gentleman at the church who was a business leader come to him to talk about the pastor adoringly. And he said, man, pastor is a great example of someone who's still being relevant no matter what age they are. Oh, it's great to see how relevant he still is. And this guy was in a different camp. And this guy was thinking, what we need is not someone who's relevant as much as someone who is wise. And part of what wisdom is accepting what you are and what you aren't. Part of what wisdom is accepting what you can change and what you can't change. Part of what wisdom is understanding that by design you are a jar of clay. And our attempts to take a jar of clay and make it eternal almost always ends up with us looking silly. And I'm not judging how someone should dress or shouldn't dress. What I'm trying to say is when we are inauthentic to who we are in our stage of life, what happens is we do the impossible. We try to make something last forever that wasn't intended to. And the more we try to be something we aren't, the more painful it becomes for us and everyone around us. There's a song by an artist I really like named John Mark McMillan. The song is entitled Death in Reverse. And he has this line. He says, and I built my life around someone who I thought I was. But in the end, all the things I do to make me feel young make me old. I built my life around someone who I thought I was, but in the end, all these things that I do to make me feel young, they just make me old. Because I'm trying to do the impossible. I'm trying to turn a jar of clay and to make it last forever. I'm trying to turn a tent into a house. It's just not what it is. You've probably heard the line, or if you haven't heard it, you maybe have felt it, the line that time is a thief. Time is a thief. My wife has this Time Hop app that shows her all the pictures that she posted years ago. And so like every week I get a screenshot of my kids. Like, this is 5 years ago, and look how little and cute they were. And here's us 7 years ago. We're about to move to Austin, and our youngest daughter is just a few months old. And now she's about to turn 8. And it reminds you that time is a thief. You've heard the quote or you've experienced it. But the truth is, time is a thief, but it can only rob you if you choose. Because a thief can only rob from someone who's not willing to let go. Time is a thief that can only rob you if you're not willing to let go. If you try to hold on to a jar of clay, then eventually time will be the thief that rips it away from you. But if you accept what you are, if you accept that this treasure is in a jar of clay, that those things that you hold on to, that you value, that you look to, that they all are temporary, then you can experience the beauty that they're supposed to have for you. So the line from Dr. Seibert, of course it's not easy. You follow a guy who ends up on a cross. Jesus ended up on the cross in his ministry, but by no means was that the end of Jesus. Jesus ended up on a cross, yes, so of course it's not going to be easy, but Jesus' end was not the cross. And so we experience adversity, we experience letting go, we experience death differently because we know the end of the story. And so we can experience our different ends in our life, different phases and stages differently. There's a priest named Cynthia Bordeaux who tells this parable of a kingdom of acorns. So in this parable, in a land far, far away, there is a kingdom made up of acorns, and they all reside right under this massive oak tree. And so these are good Western acorns. And so they have all the classes you need. Self-help classes to be the best acorn you could ever be. You've got special groups to help you deal with the trauma that you experienced from the original fall from the tree. You got special therapies, oils, essential ones, of course, to get all the acornization that you need. All these little acorns live in their community right next to this big old oak tree. And then one day, out of the blue, an acorn is dropped, and he looks drastically different. He's missing his top. He's weathered. He's cracked. And he's kind of seen as an outcast. And then what he says next makes him definitely an outcast. Because he looks to all the other acorns and he says, guys, I think we are that up there. And they go, how are we going to be that up there? And he says, I don't know, but I think it involves us being cracked open and going in the dirt. And they say, you're insane. That is so morbid because we love being acorns. I love so much what I am right now that I can't be what I was created to be. I love so much this stage of my life that I can't ever mature into the next stage that God has for me. I love so much what I'm doing right now that I can't imagine God has something else for me in the future. Of course we can't be buried. We love being acorns. Jesus says it this way in John 12. Jesus says, Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Unless it dies and changes, it's never going to become what it was created to be. A milestone of healthy spirituality is the ability to carry around death. Because we understand as followers of Jesus that death is the vehicle by which we become what we are created to be. As followers of Jesus, we understand that loss and death is part of the process. This is what Paul goes on to say in 2 Corinthians. He says this in verse 14. Because we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus will raise us also with Jesus and will bring us with you into his presence. We talk about death because we know that death is not the end. But for us to become who God is making us into, we have to experience loss. That is the cycle of life. And just as the Acorns said, we can't ever be buried and cracked because we love being what we are right now. Sometimes we feel like that about where we are. I like this phase of my life. I love being an empty nester, or I love having young kids, or I love being in high school. Because we can't imagine what's next. Sometimes as a church, we go, oh, the churches of Christ, our numbers are declining, things are looking different. We go, man, in 2010, when we had 1.6 million adherents across so many churches, weren't things great? And all of a sudden, we idolize the past, and we are afraid of the future. We idolize the past. The word idol in the Bible is always a bad thing. But sometimes that's what we do to a stage of life that we have experienced or we are currently experiencing. And we don't look forward to what God is creating. But God is the God of life and creation and something new. That's who God is. There's this line that G.K. Chesterton wrote 100 years ago. And if you try to listen to this literally, it's not going to make any sense to you. But if you can put on your poetic ears, you might hear what he had to say. G.K. Chesterton says that it might not be an automatic thing that all daisies are the same. But maybe God has never grown tired of making daisies. Maybe there is an eternal appetite for infancy. Maybe God has this new love of life that you see in a child. And that God is always like that about creating the daisies of the field, the birds of the air, and the stars in the sky. That's who God is. And then this is the line he says, "But we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we." We have sinned and grown old. We have grown old as we've tried to hold on to what was. Nothing ages like holding on to a previous stage. But God doesn't age like that because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever because God is the God of life and new birth and possibilities and resurrection. And so while we hold on to the past, and in doing so we sin because we refuse what God has for us, we age, but God, our Father, has grown younger than us. Okay, so Paul writes 2 Corinthians that we are afflicted, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but not driven to despair. We're persecuted, but we're not abandoned. We're struck down, but we're not destroyed. But this is by design because we have this treasure in jars of clay. And so we always carry around in our bodies death so that life may be revealed in us. And then he goes on to say, "Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, but inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are attaining for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, for what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen, which is eternal. So Paul says, therefore, we don't lose heart, even though what we're going through right now isn't comfortable. He actually says it's light and momentary. Now, in case you forgot Paul's resume, 5 times he was whipped by the authorities, 39 times. 3 times he was beaten with rods. Once he was stoned. 3 times he was shipwrecked. He said many times he was hungry, tired, and naked. Now, things have gone really bad if you end up naked, in case you forgot. He has gone through a lot of adversity, but he still says it is light and momentary. It's not because it's easy. It's not because it was comfortable. It's not because there wasn't sacrifice. But it's light and momentary compared to the eternal glory that far outweighs it all. Very few of us are going to say the adversity that we've gone through is light and easy when we compare it to everything else in life. But if you compare it to the age to come, it will become light and momentary. Only in comparison to the age to come will our struggles seem light and momentary. And that's why Paul is so adamant about getting you to check where you're looking, to watch where your eyes are, because that's going to dictate where you end up. Where your head's at is where the rest of you is going to follow. Right? Like, imagine a scenario. You're driving along a road, and all of a sudden there is construction. And so the shoulder of the road no longer is available to you. Now they have like a temporary median that they put up right there. So it's blocked off on one side. And then on the other side, you have an 18-wheeler that comes up right next to you. And so you're driving on one side, all of a sudden you have no margin because the shoulder is now gone. You have construction, and on the other side, you have an 18-wheeler. And you've watched enough TV, and you've seen enough commercials, and you've listened to all those lawyers tell you what 18-wheel drivers are like. You know that they're not there just to make sure that the infrastructure of our country, which affords us with many luxuries and necessities at an easy access, is really what 18-wheeler drivers are trying to do. They're not there to help our economy and our life function. No, they're there to destroy you. And so you're there and you're just ready to call 4444444 to sue this person because you know they're going to hit you. You're going to call them because they're a family attorney and they're for you. And so on the one side, you've got this 18-wheeler that's about to destroy your car. And on the other side, you have this concrete temporary construction embankment right there. And you find yourself driving and you look at one bad option on the left and see one bad option on the right. And your eyes start to look left and right, left and right. What's going to happen to your car? You're going to veer one way or the other. If your eyes are fixed one adverse place or the other, all you're going to see is your future ending up in an accident. My high school wrestling coach used to tell us that if your opponent controls your head, your opponent's going to control the rest of your body. Which is true. Learn that in elders' meetings. It's a joke. Okay. If your opponent, if the adversary controls where you're looking, they're going to control the rest of your existence. And if what you're looking at is things of this world, you're going to be destroyed. If all you're looking at is material things, if all you're looking at, if all you're following, if all you're looking after is that, what's going to happen? You're going to have an unhealthy relationship with material things. If your head's controlled there, that's where you're going to end up. If you're looking at pornography, and that's what you're looking at, what's going to happen is you're going to develop an unhealthy relationship with sex. If you find yourself always looking at news sources that are full of people who are angry and afraid of people who look at things different from them, what's going to happen is you're going to become a divisive person who's always angry and afraid of people who are seeing things different from you. Where you fix your eyes dictates where you go. In life, there is going to be adversity on either side of you. And if you are undisciplined, all you're going to do is look at those things. But Paul is saying, don't fix your eyes on what is temporary. Fix your eyes on what is unseen. And then when you do that, the troubles you experience in light of eternity all of a sudden seem much smaller. And that doesn't make sense to me. I know there are people in this room who are dealing with substantial adversity, substantial pain. And for me to say what you're going through is light and momentary would be something I would never say. But I think there's wisdom in what Paul is saying. That only through the lens of eternity can we process what's in front of us without it overwhelming us. And so may we be people who don't fix our eyes on what is seen, because it never was supposed to last forever. But may we fix our eyes on what is unseen, because that actually is what's eternal. Let me pray for you. God, would you give us eyes to see what is real and true, what is lasting? And God, when we feel adversity, when we feel lost, when we feel like time is robbing us of what we want to have, may we have such an understanding of what is eternal that we can process the temporary in light of it. God, to me, time does seem like a thief. There are things that I don't want taken from me that have been taken away from me. And there are things that I know that will not last forever that I wish they were. And God, I assume that I'm not the only one who feels that way. So help us to trust that being a jar of clay is enough. Because this extraordinary power, it's not about me. It's not about us, but it's from you. And may we remember your goodness. And we pray this in the name of the resurrected Christ.